The sound that finally broke me wasn't a scream, but the purr of a brand new BMW gleaming under party lights, a birthday gift that valued my sister at $60,000 and me at exactly $2. The sound that finally broke me wasn't a scream, or a crash, or even the sound of my own heart shattering. It was the whisper-quiet, offensively smooth purr of a brand new engine. A German engine, to be exact. It was the sound of a 2024 BMW 3 Series, gleaming under the party lights in our driveway, so white it looked like it was carved from a glacier. And on its hood sat the most enormous, ostentatious, blood-red bow I had ever seen. It was the kind of bow you see in commercials, the kind that promises a life of effortless perfection, a life that was never meant for me. The party was for my sister, Chloe, and me. Our birthdays are a week apart. Hers the 15th, mine the 22nd. She was turning 18. I was turning 22. For as long as I can remember, my parents have thrown us a joint birthday bash. It was always more of a bash for her, and more of a joint for me, if you know what I mean. I was the responsible one, the quiet one, the one who got good grades, worked a part-time job since I was 16 to save for college, and never asked for anything. Chloe was the star. She was the bubbly, beautiful, social butterfly who could charm her way out of any trouble and into anyone's heart. My parents orbited her like she was the sun, and I was just a distant, forgotten moon, occasionally catching a bit of her reflected light. This year the whole extended family was there. Aunts, uncles, cousins, all milling around our perfectly manicured backyard. My dad was manning the grill. My mom was flitting between guests with a tray of appetizers, and Chloe was holding court by the pool, her laughter echoing across the lawn. I was, as usual, on drink duty, refilling pitchers of iced tea and making sure Uncle Jerry didn't get into the good whiskey. No one seemed to notice I was the other birthday girl. I was just part of the scenery, the functional cog that helped the Chloe show run smoothly. After the cake, a three-tiered monstrosity with Chloe's name in glittering gold script, and my name in a small polite font at the bottom. My dad clinked a glass. "All right, everyone, time for presents," he boomed, a theatrical grin plastered on his face. Chloe squealed and clapped her hands. I just braced myself, a familiar knot tightening in my stomach. The gifts for Chloe came first, of course. Designer bags, expensive perfumes, gift cards to stores I couldn't even afford to walk past. She gushed over every single one, her performance of gratitude perfected over 18 years of practice. Then my dad held up a hand for silence. "And now," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "for our special girl. Chloe, you've made us so proud. You're about to graduate, to go out into the world, and we wanted you to have something. Something to help you on your journey." He pulled a small, sleek black box from his pocket. Inside was a single car key. Chloe's eyes went wide. "No way," she whispered. "You didn't." "Oh, we did," my mom said, wiping a fake tear from her eye. "Out in the driveway, sweetie." What followed was a stampede. Everyone rushed to the front of the house, phone cameras held high. And there it was, the white BMW, the red bow, the literal dream car. Chloe started sobbing, real, heaving sobs of pure ecstasy. She threw herself into my dad's arms, then my mum's. "I can't believe it. It's perfect. It's the most perfect thing in the whole world." The crowd oohed and ahed. My cousin filmed her getting into the driver's seat, caressing the leather steering wheel like it was a holy relic. I stood on the porch, watching the scene unfold, feeling like I was watching a movie about someone else's family. A bitter, acidic taste filled my mouth. I owned a car. A 2008 Honda Civic that I had bought with my own money, saved from 3 years of waitressing. It smelled like old coffee and desperation, and its check engine light was a permanent feature, but it was mine. Every dent and every dollar was mine. After about 20 minutes of car worship, my mom seemed to remember I existed. "Oh," she said, her voice a little too bright. "We didn't forget you, Sarah. David, give Sarah her gift." The crowd quieted down, their gazes shifting to me. I felt my face flush, 100 pairs of eyes suddenly dissecting me. My dad walked over, but his smile was different now. It was smaller, a little sheepish. He wasn't holding a sleek black box. He was holding a flimsy, standard greeting card envelope. It had my name on it, written in my mom's bubbly cursive. He handed it to me. "Happy birthday, kiddo," he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. I could feel the weight of everyone's pitying stares. I forced a smile, my lips feeling like they might crack. I opened the envelope. Inside was a generic card with a picture of a kitten on it. It said, "You're perfect." Tucked inside was a single, crisp $2 bill. $2. The world went silent. The sound of the crickets, the distant hum of traffic, my own breathing, it all just faded away into a low buzz in my ears. I stared at the bill. It was a novelty, a joke, a symbol of being an afterthought. My father, seeing my stunned silence, clapped me on the shoulder, a little too hard. "It's for luck," he said, forcing a laugh. "You know, a $2 bill. You always liked quirky, unique things." My entire 22 years of existence, my hard work, my independence, my quiet perseverance, all of it, calculated, weighed, and valued at exactly $2 American. I looked up from the bill and saw my sister across the lawn, posing for a selfie in front of her $60,000 car. I saw my mother beaming at her pride so radiant it was almost blinding. And I saw my father looking at me with an expression that said, "Just play along, don't make a scene." So I did. I smiled. It was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. "Wow," I said, my voice sounding strange and far away. "Thank you. It's unique." I folded the bill carefully and put it in my pocket. The party continued, but I was no longer there. I was a ghost, floating through the motions, clearing empty plates, smiling at relatives who told me how mature and grounded I was. Unlike my wild sister. They meant it as a compliment. Tonight, it felt like an insult. It felt like a justification for my erasure. Hours later, long after the last guest had left, I lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling. The house was quiet, but my mind was screaming. The $2 bill was sitting on my nightstand next to the keys to my beat-up Honda. It felt like it was mocking me, glowing in the dark. I had spent my whole life being the easy child, the one who never needed anything, hoping that one day my parents would finally see me. Not just my utility, but me. And tonight, they had shown me exactly what they saw. I was worth a novelty bill. A quirky afterthought. Around 2 a.m., I heard a noise from downstairs. Soft laughter. I crept out of my room and peered over the banister. My parents and Chloe were sitting at the kitchen table. Spread out in front of them wasn't a photo album of family memories. It was the glossy brochure for the BMW. They were tracing their fingers over pictures of the interior, mapping out a road trip Chloe wanted to take to the coast for her graduation present. They were planning her future, a future I had apparently paid for with my own invisibility. They hadn't mentioned me once. It was as if my humiliating birthday presentation had never even happened. That was it. That was the moment the ice in my veins turned to fire. The quiet, responsible daughter died in that instant. Something cold and hard and clear settled in my chest. I turned without a sound and walked back into my room. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I looked at my suitcase, already half-packed for my return to my college apartment at the end of the week. Then I looked at the $2 bill on my nightstand. And for the first time all night, I knew exactly what I had to do. My movements were unnervingly calm, a stark contrast to the hurricane raging inside my chest. I didn't throw my clothes into my suitcase. I folded them. Each shirt, each pair of jeans, placed with a precision that felt both insane and necessary. It was a methodical erasure of myself from this house. My laptop, which I'd bought with money from 1,000 plates of pasta I'd served, went into its case. My textbooks, the heavy burden of my future financed by loans I would spend a decade paying off, were stacked by the door. I took the things that were truly mine, the things I had earned through sweat and sacrifice. I left behind the persona they had built for me. The good daughter trophy from a high school debate tournament stayed on the shelf. The collection of bland beige sweaters my mom bought me every Christmas because she couldn't be bothered to remember I loved color remained in the drawer. I moved through the silent house like a phantom. Every creak of the floorboards under my feet was a thunderclap in my ears. I paused outside my parents' bedroom, hearing the low, even sound of my father's breathing. No guilt. Not a single pang. Just a cold, hollow emptiness where my love for them used to be. Downstairs, the kitchen was bathed in the pale glow of the under-cabinet lighting. The BMW brochure was still open on the table, a glossy monument to my irrelevance. I took a piece of paper from the notepad by the phone. My hand didn't even shake as I wrote. The words were short, sharp, and brutally honest. You spent $60,000 to show Chloe she's your future. You gave me $2 to show me I'm your afterthought. Message received. I took the crisp $2 bill from my pocket. Using a piece of tape from the junk drawer, I affixed it to the bottom of the note. Then I placed the paper directly on top of the brochure's picture of the gleaming white car, a $2 tombstone on the grave of our relationship. My car keys felt heavy in my hand as I slipped out the back door. The cool night air hit my face, and for a second, I just stood there, breathing it in. It smelled like freedom. The BMW was still parked in the driveway, a hulking white ghost under the moonlight. It looked arrogant, entitled. It looked like my sister. I walked past it, not giving it a second glance, and climbed into my trusty old Honda. My car. The one with 180,000 miles, a temperamental air conditioner, and a small crack in the windshield that looked like a shooting star. The one I loved because it was a testament to my own hard work. The engine turned over with a familiar rattling cough. It was loud in the dead silence of the suburban night. I expected a light to flick on in the house, a face to appear in the window. Nothing. I put the car in reverse, my headlights sweeping across the front of the house, the place I had called home for 22 years. It looked like a stranger's house now. I didn't look back as I pulled out onto the street and drove away. A few miles down the road when the manicured lawns and identical mailboxes had blurred into the anonymity of the highway, I pulled into the empty parking lot of a 24-hour convenience store. The fluorescent lights hummed above me. This was it. The final step. I took out my phone, my fingers feeling like clumsy sausages. I navigated to Chloe's contact. Her picture was a selfie of her in the new car, a photo she must have taken and set as her contact ID on my phone when I wasn't looking. My thumb hovered over the "block this caller" option. I pressed it. A small, insignificant pop-up asked me to confirm. I confirmed. Chloe was gone. Next, Mom. Her picture was a family photo from 5 years ago. We were all smiling, but my smile didn't reach my eyes even then. Block. Confirm. She was gone too. My breath hitched. This was harder. This felt like cutting off a limb. But the limb was gangrenous, and I knew if I didn't do it, the sickness would consume me whole. Finally, Dad. His contact picture was just the gray default icon. He never bothered with things like that. I stared at his name, and 1,000 fractured memories flashed through my mind. Him teaching me to ride a bike, his hand steady on the seat. Him telling me he was proud when I got my college acceptance letter, his voice gruff but sincere. For a split second, I faltered. Had I misunderstood? Was I overreacting? Was this a mistake I would regret for the rest of my life? Just as my thumb was about to press the block button, the screen lit up. A banner dropped down from the top. It was a text message. From Dad. My heart stopped. Had he heard me leave? Was this an apology? A desperate plea for me to come back? My eyes scanned the preview of the text, my blood running cold as I read the words. Hey, saw the porch light flicker. Figured you were up. Before you turn in, can you go make sure Chloe locked the doors on the new car? She keeps forgetting. Key goes on the hook by the door. The X. The text message was a punch to the gut, so swift and brutal it knocked the air from my lungs. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a desperate plea. It was an order. A casual, thoughtless directive that confirmed everything I already knew. Even now, with me gone, my primary function in his mind was to be the caretaker of Chloe and her possessions. I wasn't his daughter who had just been publicly humiliated. I was the hired help, the unpaid house manager, the designated worrier. My disappearance hadn't even registered. The flickering porch light was a potential security issue, not a sign that his other child had just been driven from her home. My thumb, which had been hesitating over the block button, slammed down with sudden vicious certainty. Block. Confirm. He was gone. A wave of something wild and terrifying and exhilarating washed over me. I was completely untethered. An island. I took a deep, shuddering breath and tossed my phone onto the passenger seat. The finality of it was deafening. No more birthday texts that felt like a corporate obligation. No more calls asking me to pick Chloe up from a party because she was too drunk to drive. No more being the family's emotional shock absorber. The silence was absolute. I drove for hours, fueled by a potent cocktail of rage and caffeine from a gas station coffee that tasted like battery acid. I didn't have a destination. I just needed to put miles between me and that house, between me and that life. The sun began to stain the horizon with shades of bruised purple and angry orange when I finally pulled over at a rest stop. My eyes burned from exhaustion and unshed tears. I leaned my head against the steering wheel, the cheap plastic cool against my forehead. The weight of what I had done finally crashed down on me. I had just detonated my entire life. What now? My college apartment was 2 hours away, but I couldn't go there. My parents had the address. They co-signed the lease. They would show up, not with remorse, but with righteous indignation. demanding to know why I had caused such a scene. They would try to spin it, to make me the villain, the ungrateful, overly sensitive daughter who couldn't take a joke. No, I couldn't go there. I needed a real clean break. I needed to disappear. I spent the next 2 days in a cheap motel off a forgotten highway, the kind with flickering neon signs and sheets that felt like sandpaper. I paid in cash using the emergency money I kept stashed in my glove compartment. I ate vending machine crackers and watched daytime television with the sound off, my mind a relentless loop of the party, the car, the $2 bill, the text message. Over and over I dissected every word, every look, searching for a single scrap of evidence that I had been wrong, that I had misjudged them. But there was nothing. It was all there, a lifetime of casual disregard culminating in one spectacular, unforgivable insult. On the third day I knew I couldn't hide forever. I had a life to build, a life that was now entirely, terrifyingly my own. I logged onto my laptop using the motel's spotty Wi-Fi and started making plans. I emailed my college advisor, explaining I was dealing with a severe family emergency and would need to withdraw from the semester. I looked for jobs, anything, anywhere. I found a listing for a live-in assistant manager at a small, independent motel in a tiny coastal town, 6 states away. It wasn't glamorous, it probably paid peanuts, but it offered a room, a small salary, and most importantly, anonymity. I sent off my resume, not expecting to hear back. To my surprise, I got an email the next day from a man named George, the owner. He said he liked my resume, that my experience waitressing showed I wasn't afraid of hard work. He asked if I could do a video interview that afternoon. I put on my nicest shirt, brushed my hair for the first time in days, and sat in front of my laptop, plastering on a confident smile while my world crumbled around me. George was an older man with kind eyes and a grandfatherly demeanor. He asked me why a college kid wanted to drop everything and move to the middle of nowhere. I fed him a practice lie about needing a break, about wanting to find myself before I committed to a career path. He seemed to buy it. By the end of the call, he offered me the job. I packed what little I had back into my Honda and started driving east. It felt surreal, like I was watching a character in a movie run away from home. Every road sign was a step further away from my old life. Every state line I crossed was a severing of another tie. When I finally pulled into the parking lot of the Sea Breeze Motel, it looked even more run-down than the pictures. The paint was peeling, and the sign had a few letters missing, so it read S.A. Breeze Tel. But it was right on the ocean, and the air smelled of salt and possibility. George greeted me with a warm handshake and showed me to my room. It was small and simple, with a bed, a desk, and a window that looked out over the crashing waves. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. For the next month I threw myself into the work. I learned how to check guests in, manage the booking system, handle angry customers, and fix a running toilet with a paperclip. It was exhausting, thankless work, but it was honest. I was earning my keep. I was building something for myself, by myself. I kept my phone turned off, hidden in a drawer. I didn't check social media. I was a ghost. One afternoon, about 6 weeks after I'd left, I was behind the front desk, sorting through mail. A letter addressed to Sarah Johnson, assistant manager, caught my eye. It wasn't unusual. We sometimes got mail for staff. But the return address made my blood freeze. It was from a law firm, one with an office in my old hometown. My heart started to pound in my chest. How did they find me? Had my parents hired a private investigator? Was I being sued for emotional distress? My hands trembled as I tore open the envelope. Inside was a letter, thick with legal jargon, but a few words jumped out at me, bold and unmistakable. Last will and testament of your great-aunt, Eleanor Vance, as the sole beneficiary. We request your presence for the reading of the will. My great-aunt Eleanor, my grandmother's sister. She was the family eccentric, a woman I'd only met a handful of times at holiday gatherings. She was sharp-tongued, fiercely independent, and had never married or had children. She always seemed to look right through the polite facades of my family, her gaze lingering on me with an expression I could never quite decipher. I had heard she passed away a few weeks ago, but the news had been a distant echo from a world I no longer inhabited. I had been named as the sole beneficiary of her will. It didn't make any sense. Why me? The letter instructed me to attend the reading in 2 weeks' time, at the law office back home. A cold dread washed over me. Going back there was the last thing on earth I wanted to do. It meant facing them. It meant reopening a wound that was just beginning to scar over. But what choice did I have? This was a legal summons, and deep down, A flicker of curiosity ignited. Why would Aunt Eleanor, a woman I barely knew, leave everything to me? As I stood there staring at the letter, my old prepaid phone, which I'd left in the desk drawer, suddenly buzzed against the wood. I hadn't turned it on, I hadn't charged it, yet it vibrated with a frantic, insistent energy. Confused, I pulled open the drawer. The screen was black, dead as a doornail, but it continued to buzz erratically, like it was receiving a message from beyond the grave. And then a single, garbled line of text somehow broke through the dead screen, glowing with an eerie white light. They know. Don't come back. It's a trap. The phone continued to buzz, a frantic, spastic rhythm against the wood of the drawer. The glowing white text on the dead screen seemed to sear itself into my retinas. They know. Don't come back. It's a trap. It was impossible. The phone's battery had been dead for weeks. There was no logical explanation for how it could receive a message, let alone display it on a lifeless screen. My mind raced, trying to find a rational explanation. A glitch? A short circuit? But the words were too specific, too perfectly timed with the arrival of the lawyer's letter. It felt less like a technical malfunction, and more like a desperate warning flare shot across a digital abyss. My first instinct was raw fear. A trap. Who sent the message? How could they possibly know I was considering going back? The message felt urgent, primal. But then a wave of cold suspicion washed over me, chilling me even more than the fear. What if the message itself was the trap? What if it was my family, trying a new tactic? Maybe they'd hired a tech-savvy cousin to spook me, to make me so paranoid that I wouldn't show up for the will reading. If I was the sole beneficiary, my absence would surely complicate things, perhaps even allow them to contest the will and claim the inheritance for themselves. My family, I realized with a fresh pang of bitterness, was certainly capable of that level of manipulation. The idea that they would stoop to such a bizarre, elaborate scheme to keep me away only solidified my resolve. They didn't want me there? Fine. That was the best reason in the world to go. I spent the next 2 weeks in a state of hypervigilance. Every unfamiliar car in the motel parking lot, every phone call from a blocked number sent a jolt of anxiety through me. I told George I needed to take a few days off for a family matter, a phrase that tasted like ash in my mouth. He was understanding, telling me to take all the time I needed. I booked a flight under my mother's maiden name, a small, probably useless precaution, and arranged to fly into an airport an hour away from my hometown. I would rent a car and drive in for the appointment, then leave immediately after. In and out, like a surgical strike. The day of the will reading, I felt like a spy in my own life. I wore a plain black dress, sunglasses, and a hat, hoping to be as unnoticeable as possible. Walking into the law office of Miller, Finch, and Hayes was like stepping onto an alien planet that was hauntingly familiar. The plush carpeting, the smell of old paper and expensive leather, the hushed, reverent atmosphere. It was the world my parents aspired to, a world where appearances were everything. The receptionist directed me to a conference room. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. I pushed the heavy oak door open and stepped inside. The room was exactly as I'd pictured it. A long, polished mahogany table dominated the space. At the head of the table sat a man in a crisp suit, presumably the lawyer, Mr. Hayes, and on one side, clustered together like a flock of vultures, were my parents and Chloe. They all turned as I entered, and for a moment no one spoke. My mother's face was a mask of pinched disapproval. My father looked uncomfortable, refusing to meet my eyes. And Chloe, she looked furious. Her arms were crossed tightly over her chest, and her eyes, the same blue as my own, shot daggers at me. The air was thick with unspoken accusations. "Sarah," my mother finally said, her voice dripping with ice, "you decided to grace us with your presence." "The letter said I was required to be here," I replied, my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil inside me. I took a seat on the opposite side of the table, the vast expanse of polished wood, feeling like a battlefield between us. Mr. Hayes cleared his throat. "Now that we are all present, we can begin," he said, opening a thick file folder. "I am Arthur Hayes, Eleanor Vance's attorney. As you know, we are here for the reading of her last will and testament." He adjusted his glasses and began to read in a dry, legal monotone. He went through the usual bequests, first donations to a few charities, a small sum to her longtime gardener. My family fidgeted impatiently. Then he got to the main event. "As for the remainder of my estate," he read, his voice unwavering, "including my primary residence located at 142 Willow Creek Lane, All its contents, my investment portfolio, and all liquid assets, I bequeath in its entirety to my great-niece, Sarah Marie Johnson." A collective gasp came from the other side of the table. "What?" Chloe shrieked, jumping to her feet. "That's impossible. Aunt Eleanor hated her. She always said Sarah was a boring little mouse." "Chloe, sit down," my father hissed, pulling her back into her chair. My mother's face had gone pale with shock, then red with rage. "Mr. Hayes, there must be some mistake," she said, her voice trembling. "Eleanor and I were very close. She would have never. She always promised her house, our family home, would stay in the family." "There is no mistake, Mrs. Johnson," Mr. Hayes said calmly. "The will is ironclad. I drafted it myself with Miss Vance 6 months ago. She was of perfectly sound mind." He then pulled out a smaller envelope. "She also left a personal letter to be read aloud at this time." He cleared his throat again, and the silence in the room became absolute, so heavy I could feel it pressing on my skin. "To my family," he began, reading Eleanor's surprisingly strong, clear handwriting from the page. "If you are hearing this, it means I'm finally off on my next great adventure. Don't send flowers. I always hated them. Now let's get to the point. David and Carol," he read, addressing my parents directly. "You are a pair of blind, sentimental fools. You have spent your entire lives polishing your prized trophy, Chloe, while you let your diamond Sarah sit in a dusty drawer, thinking she was a piece of common glass. You saw one daughter sparkle and demanded the world give her more. You saw the other's strength and decided she didn't need anything at all. You were wrong." My mother let out a strangled sob. Chloe looked like she'd been slapped. Mr. Hayes continued reading. "Chloe, you're beautiful and charming, but you're as shallow as a puddle in a heat wave. You have been given everything and have earned nothing. Your life has been a gift, and you've treated it like a disposable toy. Perhaps one day you will learn the value of something you've had to work for. I doubt it, but I suppose miracles can happen." The lawyer paused, looking over his glasses at me. "And Sarah," he read, his voice softening slightly. "My dear, quiet Sarah. I saw you. I always saw you. I saw you balancing the checkbook for your parents when you were 16 because they couldn't be bothered. I saw you working double shifts to buy that ridiculous little car while your sister was given a credit card with no limit. I saw you bite your tongue, swallow your pride, and hold your family together with the sheer force of your silent, unappreciated strength. I left you everything not because I pity you, but because you are the only one in this God-forsaken family who understands its value. You know what it is to earn something. You know what it is to build a life from scratch. This inheritance isn't a gift, it's a tool. Use it to build a life so magnificent that these people," he gestured vaguely to my family, "can't even cast a shadow on it." The room was silent, save for my mother's quiet weeping. I was stunned, speechless. Aunt Eleanor, the strange, quiet woman in the corner, had seen everything. She had been my silent witness. Mr. Hayes set the letter down. "The total value of the estate, after taxes, is estimated to be in the range of $4.7 million. The sound my father made was a choked gasp. Chloe's jaw dropped. $4.7 million. The number was so immense, so incomprehensible, it didn't even feel real. It was a lottery win, a fairy tale, a complete and total reversal of fortune that I had never, in my wildest dreams, imagined. "Now," Mr. Hayes said, turning to a final page in his file, "there is one small but rather unusual addendum to the will, a final condition that Miss Vance insisted upon." He looked directly at me. "She stipulated that before you can officially take possession of the estate, you are required to spend one night alone in her house at 142 Willow Creek Lane, from sunset to sunrise. No visitors, no phone, no outside contact." He paused, a strange look on his face. "She also stipulated that under no circumstances are you to go into the basement." A collective, uneasy silence fell over the conference room. My family, who had been gaping at me with a mixture of shock and naked greed, now looked confused. A condition? Spend a night alone in Aunt Eleanor's house, and stay out of the basement? It sounded like the setup for a B-grade horror movie. My mother finally found her voice, a shaky, indignant squeak. "That's ridiculous. What sort of morbid game is this? Eleanor was always so theatrical." She said the word theatrical as if it were a communicable disease. "The condition is legally binding," Mr. Hayes stated, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Miss Vance was very specific about it. The deed and financial assets will not be transferred into Miss Johnson's name until the stipulation is met. I will have a courier deliver the keys to the house this afternoon. You may fulfill the requirement at your earliest convenience, Sarah. Simply notify my office the following morning." My mind was reeling. A fortune, a new life, was dangling just out of reach, contingent on this bizarre, Gothic trial. Why? What could possibly be in that house, or specifically in that basement, that Eleanor wanted me to avoid so desperately? Or was it a test? Another one of Eleanor's cryptic lessons? Maybe she wanted to see if I had the courage to claim what was mine, to face the unknown on my own terms. The warning from my dead phone echoed in my head. It's a trap. Was this the trap? Not the meeting itself, but the house. "I'll do it tonight," I said, the words coming out before I had a chance to second-guess them. I saw a flicker of something, was it alarm, in my father's eyes. Chloe just scoffed, rolling her eyes as if to say, "Of course she will. The goody-two-shoes always follows the rules." The meeting concluded in a blur. I signed some preliminary paperwork, my hands still numb with shock. Mr. Hayes gave me a sympathetic look as I left, a silent acknowledgement of the family drama he had just witnessed. I walked out of that office without a single backward glance at my parents or sister. Their rage and disbelief were a palpable force behind me, but I didn't care. They were figures from a past life, ghosts at a feast they weren't invited to. That afternoon, a courier delivered a heavy, ornate iron key to my cheap motel room. It felt ancient, like something that would unlock a castle, not a house in a quiet suburban neighborhood. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery strokes of orange and purple, I drove to 142 Willow Creek Lane. Aunt Eleanor's house was nothing like I expected. It wasn't some spooky, dilapidated mansion. It was a beautiful, meticulously kept Victorian-style home, painted a cheerful shade of periwinkle blue with white trim. A wraparound porch was adorned with hanging ferns, and the garden, even in the encroaching twilight, was a riot of color. It looked like something out of a storybook. It was the complete opposite of the cold, sterile, beige McMansion I had grown up in. This house had character. It had a soul. The heavy key turned smoothly in the lock. I pushed the door open, and the air that greeted me was cool and smelled faintly of lavender and old books. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me, the sound of the lock clicking into place echoing in the sudden silence. The house was dark, save for the dying light filtering through the stained glass windows by the staircase. I fumbled for a light switch, and the foyer was instantly bathed in the warm glow of a crystal chandelier. The interior was stunning. Bookshelves lined every wall, filled to bursting. The furniture was a collection of mismatched but beautiful antiques. It was a home built by someone who loved stories, who cherished history. I spent the first hour just wandering, touching the velvet of a chaise lounge, running my fingers over the spines of leather-bound books. I felt an overwhelming sense of connection to this woman I barely knew. She had created a world for herself here, a sanctuary, and she had given it to me. In her bedroom, on a beautiful antique vanity, was a silver-backed brush and comb set, and next to it, a small framed photograph. It was a picture of me, taken about 10 years ago at a family picnic. I was sitting under a tree, reading a book, oblivious to the camera. I had been so lost in my own world, and she had seen me. She had captured a moment of my truest self. A lump formed in my throat. As night fell, the house settled into a comfortable silence. There were no strange creaks, no ghostly whispers. It felt peaceful, safe. I made myself a cup of tea in the kitchen and sat at the table, just listening to the old house breathe. The stipulation seemed almost silly now. Maybe it was just Eleanor's eccentric way of ensuring I spent some quality time in my new home before the chaos of lawyers and accountants descended. The basement door was in a small hallway off the kitchen. It was a plain, solid wood door with a heavy-duty deadbolt on it. The deadbolt was locked. I stared at it for a long moment, my curiosity warring with Eleanor's explicit instruction. What was she hiding? Family secrets? Hidden treasures? Or something more sinister? Resisting the urge, I turned away. I would honor her wish. Whatever was down there could stay down there. I decided to sleep in the guest room, not wanting to disturb Eleanor's personal space just yet. I lay in the dark, listening to the sounds of the night, feeling a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. This was real. This was my new life. I was safe. I was free. I was just drifting off to sleep when I heard it. A sound from downstairs. It was faint at first, a soft rhythmic thumping. Thump. 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 I sat bolt upright in bed, my heart instantly hammering against my ribs. The house was supposed to be empty. I was supposed to be alone. I strained my ears, listening. The thumping continued, steady and deliberate. It sounded like it was coming from the kitchen, or just off the kitchen. It was coming from behind the basement door. I crept out of bed, my feet silent on the plush runner in the hallway. The house was pitch black now. I navigated by memory, my hands skimming the walls. As I got closer to the kitchen, the sound grew louder. Thump, thump, thump. It wasn't a creak or a groan of old pipes. It was the sound of something heavy hitting against the other side of the basement door, over and over again. My breath caught in my throat. I stood in the darkness of the kitchen, staring at the basement door, which was barely visible in the sliver of moonlight coming through the window. Was someone down there? Had someone broken in? But how? The house was locked up tight, and why would they be banging on the inside of the door? Then a new sound joined the rhythmic thumping. A voice. It was a low, muffled groan, distorted by the thick wood of the door. It sounded like someone was in pain. The groaning grew louder, coalescing into a single, agonizing word, repeated over and over. Help! Me! It was a man's voice, weak and raspy, but beneath the pain and the distortion, there was something else, something horribly, terrifyingly familiar. My blood ran cold, and the fine hairs on my arms stood on end. I knew that voice. I had heard it almost every day of my life. It was my father. The world tilted on its axis. My father? Trapped in the basement? It was impossible. It defied all logic. My mind scrambled for an explanation, any explanation, other than the terrifying truth my ears were telling me. A recording? A hallucination brought on by stress and exhaustion? But the thumping was too real, the muffled cries too visceral. Each desperate plea of "help me" was a physical blow, sending ripples of ice-cold dread through my veins. My hand flew to my mouth to stifle a scream. I was frozen in the moonlight-drenched kitchen, a prisoner of my own disbelief. Why would he be here? How did he get in? The timeline made no sense. I had left him at the lawyer's office just that afternoon. This house was miles away. Had he followed me? Broken in while I was wandering through the rooms? The questions swirled in a chaotic vortex, but one thought rose above the panic with terrifying clarity. Eleanor's warning. Under no circumstances are you to go into the basement. Was this her test? A cruel psychological game to see if I would break her one rule? Was she testing my loyalty to her wishes against my instinct to help my own father? The man who had discarded me like a piece of trash. The man whose voice was now pleading for my help. The irony was so thick it was suffocating. Thump, thump, thump. Sarah, I know you're out there. Please. She locked me in. His voice was clearer now, raw with desperation. He knew I was here. This wasn't a random break-in. This was something else, something orchestrated. She locked me in. Who was she? Eleanor was dead. Did he mean my mother? Chloe? Had they done this? Had they somehow overpowered him and locked him in the basement of a dead relative's house as part of some insane, convoluted plot to... What? Scare me? Sabotage the inheritance? My family was manipulative, but this was a level of criminality that seemed beyond even them. Dad, I whispered, my voice a pathetic, trembling thing. What are you doing in there? No time to explain. He yelled back, his voice echoing strangely from behind the door. The key. There's a key. Eleanor kept it on the mantelpiece in the living room. An old skeleton key. Please, Sarah, hurry. The mantelpiece. I flashed back to my earlier exploration of the house. I had admired the ornate carved wood of the fireplace mantel, but I hadn't noticed a key. My legs, finally obeying my brain's frantic signals, carried me into the living room. I fumbled for a lamp, and the room was flooded with soft light. My eyes scanned the mantel. There, tucked behind a small porcelain clock, was a single rust-colored skeleton key. It was intricate and old, a perfect match for the deadbolt's keyhole. I picked it up. It felt cold and heavy in my trembling hand. This was the moment of decision. The will, the $4.7 million, my entire future was contingent on me following one simple rule: stay out of the basement. But my father, for all his failings, was trapped, begging for his life. Could I really leave him down there? Could I live with myself if something happened to him? The memory of his final text, the casual disregard for my existence, the concern only for Chloe's car flashed in my mind. It was a potent dose of poison, but the sound of his fear was a powerful antidote. Sarah, please, you have to listen to me, he shouted, his voice cracking. It's not what you think. This is all part of her plan. Eleanor's plan. Eleanor's plan? What did that mean? The pieces were clicking together in a way that formed a terrifying, nonsensical picture. The strange will, the impossible message on my phone, and now my father, locked in the one place I was forbidden to go. I ran back to the basement door, the key clutched in my sweaty palm. "What plan?" I yelled through the wood. "What are you talking about?" "Just open the door. I'll explain everything, I swear." She was crazy, Sarah. A crazy, vindictive old woman. She set this all up. His words chipped away at the image I had built of my great-aunt, the wise, silent observer, my secret protector. Had I been wrong about her? Was this all just a cruel, posthumous revenge scheme against her family? A way to tear us apart, even from the grave? I hesitated, the key hovering in front of the lock. The warning on my phone felt more potent than ever. It's a trap. Was my father the bait? Was opening this door the trigger? Then another voice joined his from behind the door. A female voice. My mother. "He's right, Sarah," she cried, her voice muffled but unmistakable. "Please, sweetheart, let us out. We were so wrong. We see that now. This whole thing. It was to show us. Please, honey, we love you." My mother. And she was crying. Real heartbroken sobs, not the crocodile tears I'd seen at the party. And she said we. Both of them were down there. This changed everything. It was no longer just my neglectful father. It was my mother, too. The image of them trapped together in the dark, cold basement. It was a monstrous thought. Had they come here to contest the will, to search the house for some hidden codicil, and somehow gotten themselves trapped? It was plausible. It was exactly the sort of foolish, greedy thing they would do. Her words, "We were so wrong," echoed in my ears. Was it possible? Had this whole ordeal, my disappearance, the shocking will, actually forced them to see the truth? Was this my chance not just to inherit a fortune, but to get back the one thing I had always truly wanted? A family that saw me, that valued me, that loved me. The hope was a fragile, flickering candle in the hurricane of my confusion. It was probably foolish, probably naive, but it was there, and it was powerful. "We're sorry, Sarah," my father's voice came again, softer this time, full of what sounded like genuine remorse. "We're so sorry." That was it. That was the phrase I had waited 22 years to hear. I squeezed my eyes shut, a single tear tracing a hot path down my cheek. Maybe this was Eleanor's true gift. Not the money, but this moment of reckoning. A forced reconciliation in the most bizarre of circumstances. I took a deep breath. My decision made. A family was worth more than $4.7 million. I slid the old skeleton key into the heavy deadbolt. It felt gritty, like it hadn't been turned in a century. I put my other hand on the doorknob. "I'm opening it," I called out, my voice shaking. "Stand back." I turned the key. With a loud groaning clunk, the old lock disengaged. I twisted the doorknob and pulled. The heavy door swung inward, opening into a yawning chasm of absolute blackness and the damp, earthy smell of a cellar. "Dad? Mom?" I called into the void. For a moment, there was only silence. The thumping had stopped. The crying had stopped. A sudden, terrible premonition washed over me. I had made a mistake. A horrible, irreversible mistake. Then, from the darkness, a figure emerged. But it wasn't my father, and it wasn't my mother. It was Chloe. She was holding a small, powerful flashlight, and her face was illuminated from below, casting eerie shadows across her features. She wasn't crying. She wasn't scared. She was smiling. A wide, triumphant, predatory smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Took you long enough," she said, her voice dripping with venomous satisfaction. And from the darkness behind her, two large, burly men I had never seen before stepped into the light. One of them was holding a coil of rope. The other was holding a roll of duct tape. My blood turned to ice water. The air in my lungs solidified. For a heart-stopping second, my brain refused to process the scene in front of me. Chloe. The triumphant smirk. The two menacing strangers. It was a tableau from a nightmare, a grotesque distortion of the reunion I had foolishly allowed myself to hope for. The basement wasn't a prison. It was an ambush. "Chloe?" "What is this?" I managed to stammer, my voice a thready whisper. I took an involuntary step back, my bare foot hitting the cold kitchen tile. "This," she said, stepping out of the basement and into the kitchen, her movements fluid and confident, "is a long overdue correction." The two men followed her out, their sheer size seeming to shrink the room. They moved with a purpose that terrified me, fanning out to block any potential escape. The back door, the hallway to the front, every exit was cut off. "Where are Mom and Dad?" I demanded, a sliver of my old protective sister instinct flaring amidst the terror. "What did you do to them?" Chloe let out a short, sharp laugh. It was a sound completely devoid of humor, like shattering glass. "Mom and Dad? Oh, they're fine. Probably at home, sleeping soundly in their beds, blissfully unaware that their golden child is finally taking what's rightfully hers." She mimicked their voices, the desperate, pleading cries I had heard through the door. "Help me, Sarah. We love you, sweetheart." Her impression was flawless, a perfect, chilling echo of what I'd heard. Pathetic, wasn't it? But then, you always were a sucker for their approval. I knew you wouldn't be able to resist. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. The voices. It was all her. A performance. A cruel, calculated puppet show designed to play on my deepest vulnerabilities. She had used my desperate, pathetic longing for our parents' love as a weapon against me. The inheritance. "You can't just take it," I said, my mind struggling to grasp the logistics of her insane plan. "It's in my name. The will is ironclad." "Wills can be changed," she purred, taking a step closer. The flashlight beam danced across my face, blinding me. Or more accurately, the beneficiary can be indisposed. See, you're going to have a little accident, Sarah. A tragic, unfortunate accident. You'll be so distraught over inheriting this creepy old house that you'll decide to end it all. You'll leave a note, of course." She gestured with the flashlight towards the kitchen table, where a pen and a piece of familiar-looking stationery sat, ready. "A note saying you've been depressed, that it's all too much, and that you're leaving everything to your beloved grieving sister, the only person who ever truly understood you." The plan was as monstrous as it was meticulous. I looked at the two men, their faces impassive and hard. They weren't family friends. They were hired muscle. Chloe, my charming, bubbly, popular sister, had hired criminals to help her murder me for my inheritance. "You're insane," I breathed, backing away until my back hit the kitchen counter. The edge of the granite dug into my spine. "You won't get away with this." "Oh, I think I will," she said calmly. "Who's going to question it? You have no friends here. You ran away from home. You're a troubled young woman who couldn't handle the pressure. Mom and Dad will be so devastated by your suicide that they won't look too closely. They'll just be glad to have the money back in the family where it belongs. They'll be sad for a week, and then they'll help me pick out the custom interior for my new Porsche." Her callousness was absolute. She spoke of our parents not as people, but as predictable, easily manipulated pawns in her game. And the most sickening part was, she was probably right. They would mourn the idea of me, but they would be comforted by the money. My mind raced, desperately searching for a way out. My phone was in my bag, upstairs. Even if I could get to it, who would I call? The local police? By the time they arrived, it would be too late. I was trapped. I had walked right into the snare, led by my own stupid hope. The warning on the phone. It's a trap. Who could have sent it? Aunt Eleanor. It was a crazy thought, but who else knew? Who else could have possibly warned me? Eleanor knew, I said aloud, the thought crystallizing into a weapon. Aunt Eleanor knew what you were. That's why she left it to me. She knew you were a monster. Chloe's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. A flicker of rage crossed her face before she masked it again. That crazy old bitch was just jealous. She was a dried-up spinster, and I had everything she never did. Youth, beauty, a life. She did this to spite me, to spite all of us. She gestured to the two men. All right, boys, we're done talking. Grab her. They started to advance on me. My heart was a wild animal throwing itself against the cage of my ribs. I frantically scanned the kitchen for a weapon. A knife block sat on the counter, just inches from my hand. I lunged for it, my fingers wrapping around the smooth, heavy handle of the largest chef's knife. I whipped it out, holding it in front of me, the blade gleaming under the flashlight's beam. "Stay back!" I screamed, my voice raw with terror and adrenaline. The men paused, exchanging a look. They hadn't expected me to fight back. Chloe, however, just laughed again. "Oh, this is rich. Sarah, the quiet little mouse, is going to play with knives. You wouldn't hurt a fly. You don't have it in you." She was right. I was terrified. The knife felt alien and heavy in my hand, but she was also wrong. The person I was a month ago, the girl who would do anything to keep the peace, was gone. She had died in the driveway next to a white BMW with a big red bow on it. "Try me," I said, my voice low and shaking, but with an undercurrent of steel I didn't know I possessed. One of the men decided to call my bluff. He took a sudden step forward, his hand reaching for my wrist. Acting on pure instinct, I slashed out with the knife. I didn't aim to kill, just to warn, to create space, but he was faster than I expected. He dodged the blade, but it caught the sleeve of his jacket, slicing through the fabric and, I think, his skin. He yelped and jumped back, clutching his arm. Damn it, she cut me. Chloe's face hardened into a mask of pure fury. You little bitch, you'll pay for that. She nodded to the second man. Get her, now. The second man was bigger, and he wasn't going to make the same mistake. He lunged, not at my knife hand, but at my legs, tackling me in a brutal football-style takedown. The air exploded from my lungs as my head hit the tile floor with a sickening crack. The knife clattered out of my grasp, sliding across the linoleum and disappearing under the refrigerator. Stars exploded behind my eyes. The man's heavy body pinned me to the floor, his knee digging into my chest. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't scream. The first man, nursing his arm, came over and grabbed my wrists, pulling them viciously behind my back. Duct tape, Chloe commanded, her voice cold and businesslike. I struggled, thrashing against them, but it was useless. I was completely overpowered. The man with the tape ripped off a long strip with a sound that seemed to echo the tearing of my last shred of hope. He was about to slap it over my mouth when, from upstairs, a sound echoed through the silent house. It was music, a gentle, tinkling melody. It was the unmistakable sound of a child's music box, and it was coming from Aunt Eleanor's bedroom. Everyone froze. The man holding me loosened his grip slightly. Chloe's head snapped up, her eyes wide with confusion and a flicker of fear. "Who is that?" she whispered. "Is someone else in the house?" The music box played its delicate, haunting tune for a few more seconds, and then abruptly stopped. It was replaced by a new sound, the slow, heavy, deliberate creak of a floorboard from the room directly above us, and then another, and another. Someone, or something, was walking across the floor of Eleanor's bedroom, and it was walking towards the stairs. The creaking footsteps overhead were slow and ponderous, each one landing with an unnatural weight that seemed to press down on the very air in the kitchen. Chloe and her hired thugs were paralyzed, their heads tilted upwards, their bravado evaporating in the face of the inexplicable. The sounds were impossible. We all knew we were the only living people in the house. "It's just the old house settling," one of the men muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. The footsteps were too rhythmic, too deliberate. They reached the top of the main staircase, paused, and then began their slow, methodical descent. Creak, creak, creak. This was my chance. In their moment of superstitious fear, the man pinning me had shifted his weight. It was a subtle change, but it was enough. I gathered all my strength, bucked my hips upwards, and twisted my body with a guttural scream of pure, desperate rage. I caught him off balance. He stumbled, and for a split second, I was free. I scrambled across the floor on my hands and knees, adrenaline erasing the throbbing pain in my head. "Get her!" Chloe shrieked, snapping out of her trance. I didn't run for the doors. They were still blocked. Instead, I scrambled towards the one place they never expected me to go, the open basement. I half-crawled, half fell down the old wooden steps, plunging into the inky, musty darkness below. I landed in a heap on the cold, damp concrete floor, the heavy wooden door slamming shut above me, plunging me into absolute blackness. I heard the deadbolt, the one I had so foolishly opened, slide back into place with a sickening, final thunk. I was trapped. Panic clawed at my throat. I had escaped my immediate attackers only to lock myself in a dark, underground prison. Heavy footsteps thundered above me as the two men searched the kitchen. "She's not here. Where'd she go?" one of them yelled. "She went into the basement, you idiot," Chloe screamed. "She locked herself in. Fine, leave her. She can rot down there. We'll deal with her in the morning. Let's find the main circuit breaker. We're doing this my way." Their footsteps receded. I was alone in the pitch-black silence, my own ragged breathing the only sound. My head throbbed, and the damp cold of the concrete was already seeping into my clothes. Rot down here. That was Chloe's plan now. Leave me to die of exposure or starvation, a slower, more deniable death than her original plan. I pushed myself up, my hands brushing against the rough stone walls, and tried to get my bearings. The air was thick with the smell of earth, damp and something else. Lavender, the same faint scent that filled the rest of the house. I fumbled in my pocket, my fingers closing around the small, smooth rectangle of my motel room key card. Useless. Then I remembered the heavy, ornate iron key to the front door was still in the pocket of my dress. A cold comfort, but it was something. My hands searched my other pocket. Empty. Then I remembered. My phone. I hadn't had time to grab my purse. It was still upstairs, in the guest room. Defeated, I sank to the floor, pulling my knees to my chest. Was this how it ended? Killed by my own sister's greed in the basement of a house that was supposed to be my salvation? I thought of Aunt Eleanor, the woman who had seen me, who had believed in me. I had failed her test. I had opened the door, and then I saw it, a thin sliver of pale white light from the far corner of the basement. It wasn't moonlight. It was too steady, too focused. Hope, fragile but fierce, surged through me. I crawled towards it, my hands scraping against the uneven floor. The light was coming from under another door, one I hadn't seen in the darkness. It was a small, low door, set deep into the foundation wall. As I got closer, I saw that it was made of solid steel, with a modern, high-tech keypad next to the handle instead of a lock. The keypad was glowing faintly. This wasn't part of the original house. This was new. This was what Eleanor didn't want anyone to find. My heart pounded. Was someone else down here? I pressed my ear to the cold steel. Silence. I reached out a trembling hand and touched the keypad. It beeped, the numbers lighting up brightly. It was waiting for a code. What could it be? A birthday? An address? I tried Eleanor's birthday, my birthday, the house number. Nothing. Access denied. Over and over. Frustrated, I leaned my head against the cold steel door. My mind was a blur of panic and pain. What had my father, or rather Chloe pretending to be my father, said? Eleanor's plan. What was her plan? The letter. The words from her letter, read by Mr. Hayes, echoed in my memory. You let your diamond, Sarah, sit in a dusty drawer, thinking she was a piece of common glass. A diamond. Common glass. It was just a metaphor, wasn't it? Suddenly, the house's main power cut out. Chloe had found the breaker. The glowing keypad went dark, and the sliver of light under the door vanished. I was plunged back into absolute, terrifying blackness. But just as despair threatened to swallow me whole, the keypad flickered back to life, now running on some kind of internal battery. And this time a single word was illuminated on the small LCD screen above the numbers. Diamond. It wasn't a clue. It was the answer. My fingers flew across the keypad, spelling out the word using the corresponding letters on the number keys. DIAMOND. 34266663. There was a loud click and a low hiss, and the heavy steel door swung inward. I was blinded by a sudden flood of bright, clean light. I shielded my eyes, and when I could see again, I gasped. I wasn't in a musty cellar anymore. I was standing in a small, climate-controlled room. It was more of a high-tech office or command center than a basement. A bank of computer monitors was humming quietly against one wall, displaying security camera feeds from every angle of the house, the kitchen, the living room, the front porch. On a large central monitor, a pre-recorded video was paused, showing a close-up of a woman's face. It was Aunt Eleanor. On a desk sat a laptop, open and waiting. Next to it was a satellite phone and a simple, typed note. Dear Sarah, it read, if you are reading this, it means you opened the door. Don't feel bad. I knew you would. Your compassion has always been your greatest strength and your greatest weakness. I knew they would use it against you. That's why I made this contingency plan. Your real inheritance isn't the house or the money. It's this. A chance to be free. My eyes darted around the room. This was Eleanor's true sanctuary. This was her plan. The spooky music box, the creaking footsteps. It must have all been on a timer, a pre-recorded sequence of sounds designed to frighten intruders, to buy me time. The impossible text message. It must have been sent from here, via some kind of emergency broadcast system linked to my old phone. She had anticipated everything. I looked back at the main monitor and pressed the spacebar on the keyboard. Eleanor's face came to life. She looked directly into the camera, her eyes sharp and intelligent. Hello, Sarah, she said, her voice crisp and clear. I hope you're okay. I've set up a little surprise for your sister. But first, you need to call the police. Use the satellite phone. Tell them there's a home invasion in progress. Tell them you're trapped in a basement panic room. The police in this town are slow, so you must call now. After you've made the call, turn your attention to the laptop. I've left a little present for you there. And Sarah, be the diamond. Don't ever let them treat you like glass again. I love you. The video ended. Tears streamed down my face. She loved me. Someone in my family had truly, genuinely loved me. I grabbed the satellite phone and dialed 911, my voice shaking as I relayed the information. Then I turned to the laptop. Open on the screen was an email ready to be sent. The recipient was my father's personal email address. The subject line was, "Your golden child." Attached were several files. I clicked on the first one. It was an audio file. I pressed play. I heard Chloe's voice, clear as a bell. "Mom and Dad? Oh, they're fine. Blissfully unaware that their golden child is finally taking what's rightfully hers." I clicked the next file. "They'll be sad for a week, and then they'll help me pick out the custom interior for my new Porsche." Eleanor had hidden microphones all over the house. She had recorded every venomous, sociopathic word that had come out of Chloe's mouth. My hand hovered over the send button. This was it. The final test. I could just take the money and disappear. Or I could burn their whole world to the ground. Eleanor's final words echoed in my head. "Be the diamond." I clicked send. Upstairs I heard a crash. Chloe must have gotten impatient. The security monitors showed her and the two men trying to break down the basement door with a fireplace poker. They were making a lot of noise. They didn't hear the sirens until it was too late. I watched on the monitors as the flashing blue and red lights painted the living room walls. I watched as police officers swarmed the house. I watched the utter bewildered shock on Chloe's face as she was tackled to the ground, her murderous plans turning to ash in an instant. When the police finally opened the panic room door, I walked out, blinking in the bright lights, into a house filled with uniforms. The ordeal was over. The aftermath was a whirlwind. Chloe and her accomplices were arrested. The audio recordings were an open and shut case. My parents, when they were woken by a 4 a.m. phone call from the police, were horrified. Not just by what Chloe had done, but by what she had said about them. The email I had sent had shattered their denial. They tried to call me, to apologize, to explain. I didn't answer. I changed my number the next day. I never went back to my old hometown. I fulfilled the residency requirement and legally inherited everything. The first thing I did was sell the BMW and donate the money to a charity for abused children. I kept Eleanor's house, her sanctuary, my sanctuary. I honored her memory by living, truly living, for the first time in my life. I went back to college, finished my degree on my own terms, and used the resources Eleanor left me to start a foundation that provides scholarships for kids from neglectful homes, the quiet ones, the ones who get overlooked. Every now and then I think about that $2 bill. It was meant to be an insult, a symbol of my worthlessness. But in the end, it was the catalyst that changed my entire life. It was the price of my freedom, and I would have paid it 1,000 times over. I was no longer the afterthought. I was the entire story, and it was just beginning.